Hi guys, welcome to Brovia Made, and today we are making a TV stand out of this nice pallet wood I managed to find. But I only managed to find one pallet of that nice looking wood, so I have some normal pine pallets to beef up the TV stand a bit, since the customer's TV is a very heavy one, so she wants it really sturdy. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plane one side of all these boards so we have a nice flat surface to glue on, so we can have a nice seamless glue up. So as you can see here, there are two different types of wood, two different types of colour as well, but this is the sort of look me and the customer agreed on and what we are going to do, but you'll see in a little bit how this didn't work out. So we got a fresh bottle of Type Bond ready to glue up all the planks. This is going to be the first bundle that I'm going to do. I'm not going to record the other ones because I don't want this whole video to be me gluing up planks, but there they are in my nice new pipe clamps. And here's all three boards that I just put through the planer to get a nice flat edge. But a flat edge doesn't always mean square, but we'll talk about that later. Now, when I glued these boards up, I wanted to use the glue, like the run out on the outside, to hold these boards together while I put them through the planer. But I didn't think about the nail holes, which made the glue squeeze out on each other, which stuck these boards together. But I managed to get them apart with an axe and a chisel. I got a little bit of tear out, but it's nothing feeding it through the planer won't fix. So, got a nice fresh bottle of Type Bond, and we're going to go ahead and glue these boards up into roughly 12 inches, just so I can feed them back through the planer to flatten them out a bit. But here's where I made my mistake. Instead of gluing these up, I should have quickly buzzed them through the table saw to square each side up, because what actually happened here is when I glued them up, because each side weren't square, they were like bubbling up in triangles in certain areas, and at the time I didn't think too much about it, because this is usually how I just glue things up, just because it's quicker and it usually doesn't matter. But because of that pattern that we're trying to make, it mattered a lot, because after I fed it through the planer, obviously more gets taken off the high points than the low points, so we didn't end up with a perfect pattern going all the way through. But I'll show you how I'll resolve this in the end. So here's all the boards getting ready to glue up, and when I ran this one through the planer, we got a little bit of chip out. But I've been trying to get into doing more inlays because I quite like the look of bow ties, so this is a good practice piece. It's not quite a bow tie, but it's an easy square. So I sat there with my cheap chisels and chiseled out this square part, and at the time it was a really nice solid fit, and I was really happy with it. But after I sanded it down, it wasn't that good. I think it's still good for a first attempt, but I could do a lot better. And this dust here is my insurance to put it round the edge while I'm gluing it up, to hopefully fill up any of those gaps. But I'll show you at the end of the video how my inlay turned out. So for now, we're just going to cut the top of it off, and then we're going to come back with a belt sander and just sand it flush. And this is a brand new tool for me. I don't know if you can tell, but it's very clean at the minute. There's no dust on it. But while using this tool, you need to be very careful with it, because it can take off a lot with the blink of an eye if you accidentally do something wrong with it. But here's how I look before and after. I think I did a pretty good job for one of my first attempts. But with that out of the way, we can get on to gluing these two sides back together, so we end up with a nice long board that we can cut down to final size and start gluing everything up. And if you saw on one of my previous shorts, I fixed up my circular saw so I can finally use it with a homemade track saw to get perfect cuts, as you can see there, a perfect 90-degree angle. And this is the sort of shape I am going for, as you can tell from the drawing in the start of the video. So we're going through cutting all of this, and if the blade depth looks a bit suspicious, this blade only cuts right when it's fully extended. I don't know why, but that's just how it goes. So don't buy cheap tools, let this be a lesson to you, but for now that's what I have. I also got this cheap kit to make plugs that I thought I'd use for the holes, but they didn't turn out that nice, so I just left it. I put some of these studs in here so I can more easily line everything up, and I don't care what anyone says, these do add strength to the joint, because otherwise this would just be a butt joint, which means end grain gluing against side grain, and that's always going to be a weaker joint. Using these plugs means that you can do side grain to side grain, which makes the joint a lot stronger. Plus, there is a bit of wood in the middle to help with the shear force. So, after I glued all that up, I went round to all the other little holes and I just filled them up with my trusty sawdust and wood glue. Then after that all dried, I sanded everything off, and right here is where you can start to see how the grain and everything's going to look together. I accidentally dropped this piece and chipped out a corner, so I had to do another inlay, which turned out better than my other inlay, which was surprising to me because I did this one really quickly, as with the other one I actually took my time with it, and you can actually barely even see it. I did a good job at matching the grain, and I'm quite proud of that little inlay at the bottom. You can barely tell it's even there. So now with that out of the way, we can get on to our final glue up. Through this project, I've actually used nearly a full gallon of Titebond, which I didn't think this would soak up so much glue, but I guess it's also me using too much glue as well. I need to be a bit more sensible with my gluing, I think, but we're going to take all that out of the clamps and we're going to start on the legs. There are the legs. I thought I'd do a nice little editing trick. It turned out pretty lame, but there you go. And after I did all that, I cut out these little strips because I didn't really get a good photo of it, but some parts were thicker than the others and the pattern didn't all line up the whole way around. Me and the customer talked and we quite liked this wood as a bit of a veneer to go around the outside, just to smooth everything up and make it look cleaner, which, to be honest, I like the look better of this than what we had planned in the first place. So a little bit of a blessing in disguise, but also a lesson for me in the future if I ever do do a pattern thing. And here's a very rare video of me using hand tools. I managed to sharpen my plane and got it cutting, but I always hate using hand tools. It means using my muscles, and it's horrible. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to glue these legs on now. I was originally going to use threaded inserts, but I didn't have a drill bit long enough to go all the way through the actual leg, and I didn't want to put any screws or nails in through the other side because then you'd have an ugly nail head or screw head on the other side. But this is just going to be a TV stand. It's not going to be moved around often, so gluing it on will be plenty strong. And now that we got everything together, we're getting ready for the final sanding, and as you can see here, I'm going in a pattern, going up and down, side to side, but always making sure that I finish going with the grain rather than against the grain. And I also use a little handheld light to be able to tell if the scratches from the previous grit are taken away. Now, I sanded this table all the way up to 600 grit, which a lot of people have told me you shouldn't do, but I've had no issues with my finish soaking in. I use mineral oil and beeswax on this project because it's just a TV stand. It's not like a dining table or anything, but it soaks it up perfectly fine. Now, I wouldn't do the same thing if I was going to, use like a poly coat or something, because I want that to soak into the wood. But either way, that's what I did for this table, and it worked perfectly fine. As you can see there, I quickly painted the legs, and now we are going to use the mineral oil, and you'll really see how this table changes. There's my little beeswax mix. It's covered in sawdust at the minute, but the sawdust can be easily wiped off after everything's been soaked into the wood. So, and what I'm doing here is I'm soaking the cloth in mineral oil rather than using it on the table, because I've been told in a few woodworking communities that just spraying it straight onto the table can leave marks and doesn't give you as even finish. So I'm trying to use the cloth to make sure everything is as even as possible, and it turned out to work just fine. I did do a video on my last video with my bedside tables. I did do a comparison between spraying it directly onto the table and the cloth, but I didn't see much of a difference. But either way, that's what I did here, and as you can see, the table came out really nice, Personally, I would have liked to stain the inside of the table. I'm not a big fan of just the raw pine wood, but this is what the customer wanted, and to be honest, it doesn't look too bad. I quite like it. I especially love the grain around the outside. I think it was a really nice wood. I'm not quite sure if this is pine. It could be pine, but from the sap of the actual tree. But if you know what type of wood this is, or have an idea of what it could be, then let me know in the comments. It did feel a little bit harder than pine usually does, but it's not as hard as like an oak, so I've got no clue. But either way, I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe.